I am Kimberly, 29 years old, and a software engineer who bought my own condo at 27 through pure hard work. Growing up with my golden child brother Jason was always difficult, but nothing prepared me for what happened at his 25th birthday party. My parents always felt entitled to my success, but I never thought their greed would turn violent. When that champagne bottle struck my head, I knew things would never be the same. If you are watching this, drop a comment letting me know where you are from, and hit that like and subscribe button to see how I dealt with family members who crossed unforgivable boundaries. I grew up in what most people would consider an upper-middle-class family in suburban Massachusetts. From the outside, we seemed like the perfect American family. My father, Robert, worked as a financial advisor, and my mother, Diane, ran a small boutique downtown. We lived in a beautiful 4-bedroom colonial-style house with a perfectly manicured lawn. But behind closed doors, our family dynamic was far from perfect. From an early age, it was clear that my younger brother Jason was the favorite child. He was 3 years younger than me, and from the moment he was born, my parents seemed to shift all their attention and affection to him. When Jason got a B on his report card, he would receive praise and encouragement. When I got straight, as it was simply expected, Jason received lavish birthday parties with dozens of friends invited, while my birthdays were often just quiet family dinners. My parents always had this controlling nature about them. Their love felt conditional, based entirely on obedience and meeting their expectations. I remember when I was 16 and wanted to attend a summer coding camp instead of the debutante classes my mother had signed me up for. The argument lasted for weeks, with my mother giving me the silent treatment and my father lecturing me about family obligations and traditions. Despite their disapproval, I was determined to forge my own path. I applied for scholarships and worked part-time jobs throughout high school to save money. When college acceptance letters came in, my parents assumed I would attend the local university where they could maintain their control. Instead, I accepted a scholarship to a tech school 3 states away. My parents refused to contribute a single dollar to my education after that decision. While they paid for every cent of Jason's business degree at an expensive private university, I worked 30 hours a week at a coffee shop while maintaining a full course load. I took summer classes to graduate early and minimize my student loans. By the time I graduated with my computer science degree, I had already lined up a job at a respected tech company. My career took off quickly. I started as a junior developer, but was promoted twice in my first 3 years. I was good at what I did. I worked hard, and I saved aggressively. While my friends were spending their money on designer clothes and exotic vacations, I lived frugally in a tiny studio apartment and put away as much as possible for a down payment on a property. At 27, after years of disciplined saving and a particularly good bonus from work, I was able to put a 20% down payment on a beautiful condo in a desirable neighborhood. The property cost $450,000, which was a stretch for me financially, but I had done all the calculations and knew I could make it work. This was entirely my achievement, accomplished without a single penny from my parents. When I first bought the condo, my parents actually seemed proud of me for a change. They came to see it, and my mother took dozens of photos to show her friends. My father walked around, nodding in approval, asking about property values in the area and whether I got a good interest rate on my mortgage. For a brief moment, I felt like I had finally earned their respect. But that feeling did not last long. Within a few months, their pride in my achievement morphed into something else entirely: entitlement. It started with subtle comments about how lucky I was to have such a nice place at my age, as if luck rather than hard work had gotten me there. Then came suggestions about how the spare bedroom would make a perfect place for them to stay when they wanted to visit the city, which became increasingly frequent and extended visits. Around this time, I began to notice signs that my parents were not as financially secure as they had always presented themselves to be. My mother mentioned having to close her boutique due to declining sales. My father seemed stressed and would change the subject whenever I asked about his work. I later learned they had made several poor investment decisions and had been living beyond their means for years, financing their lifestyle with credit cards and home equity loans. The hints about my condo became less subtle. My mother would say things like, "It is such a shame this beautiful place sits empty while you are at work all day. Your father and I could really use a place like this now that we are thinking about downsizing." My father took a different approach, talking about how property should be shared within families, and how in his day, children understood the importance of taking care of their parents. I tried to be understanding about their financial situation, offering to help them create a budget or connect them with a legitimate financial advisor. But they were not interested in solutions that required them to change their habits or lifestyle. They wanted quick fixes, and in their minds, my condo had become the answer to their problems. The first direct request came about 8 months after I had purchased the property. My father called to ask if I would consider selling the condo and lending them the proceeds so they could pay off some debts. When I explained that this was my home and I had no intention of selling it, he became angry, reminding me of all the sacrifices they had supposedly made for me growing up. The conversation ended with him hanging up on me. After that, the pressure intensified. My mother would call crying, saying I was breaking her heart by being so selfish. My father sent emails with links to articles about ungrateful children who abandon their parents in times of need. Even Jason got involved, calling to suggest that maybe I could help out the family given how successful I had become. It was clear he had been coached on what to say. Through all of this, I remained firm in my position. The condo was mine, purchased with my hard-earned money, and I was not going to give it up. Each time I stood my ground, the tension between us grew. Family gatherings became uncomfortable affairs filled with passive-aggressive comments and guilt trips, but nothing prepared me for what would happen at Jason's 25th birthday party. Jason had always been the golden child in our family. While I had to fight for every bit of recognition, Jason received praise and rewards simply for existing. His 25th birthday was approaching, and true to form, our parents were planning an extravagant celebration at their house. They had invited extended family friends, and even some of his business school professors. The event was to be a sophisticated cocktail party with catered food, and an open bar, a far cry from the quiet dinners that had marked my own milestone birthdays. I received the invitation 3 weeks before the party. My initial reaction was reluctance, given the growing tension between my parents and me over my condo. However, despite our differences, I still wanted to maintain some semblance of family connection. Jason, for all his faults, was still my brother. While he often sided with our parents, there had been rare moments of solidarity between us over the years. I decided to attend the party, hoping we could all behave like adults for one evening. The week leading up to the party brought a significant escalation in my parents' demands about my condo. On Monday, my father, Robert, called me while I was at work. I stepped into an empty conference room to take the call, expecting the usual pleasantries before he would inevitably bring up the condo. This time, he skipped the pleasantries altogether. "Kimberly, your mother and I have been thinking," he started, his voice carrying that authoritative tone he used when he expected immediate compliance. "We have come to the conclusion that the most appropriate thing would be for you to gift us your condo." I nearly dropped my phone. "Gift it to you, Dad, that is my home. I worked for years to afford it." "We gave you life," he replied, as if that trumped all other considerations. "We raised you, fed you, clothed you. Everything you have is because of us. Now it is time for you to show some gratitude." The conversation deteriorated from there. My father brought up every perceived sacrifice they had made for me, conveniently forgetting how they had cut me off financially during college and had never supported my career choices. When I remained firm in my refusal, he called me selfish and ungrateful before hanging up. Tuesday brought a tearful call from my mother, Diane. Unlike my father, she took the approach of emotional manipulation. "Kimberly, sweetie," she said between obviously forced sobs, "I just do not understand how my own daughter could watch her parents struggle when she has the means to help. What did I do wrong raising you to make you so selfish?" Again, I tried to explain that giving up my home was not a reasonable request and that I was willing to help them in other ways. I suggested financial counseling, offered to help them create a budget, even proposed setting up regular family dinners to save them money on food. None of these solutions interested her. By the end of the call, her sadness had turned to cold anger. "I suppose we will see you at Jason's party on Saturday," she said. "Maybe by then you will have come to your senses about what family really means." On Wednesday evening, I met my friend Stephanie for dinner at our favorite restaurant. Stephanie had been my roommate in college and had witnessed firsthand how my parents had withdrawn all support when I chose my own path. Over plates of pasta, I filled her in on the latest developments. "They want you to give them your condo." Stephanie's fork clattered against her plate. "Not loan them money. Not let them stay there temporarily, but actually give them your home." I nodded, pushing my food around my plate. "They seem to think they are entitled to it because they are my parents." Stephanie reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Kim, this is not normal. You know that, right? Parents are supposed to want their children to succeed, not take from them." "I know," I sighed. "The worst part is I still feel guilty saying no, like maybe I am being selfish." "That is the conditioning talking," Stephanie said firmly. "They have spent years making you feel like your needs do not matter. But they do matter, Kim. Your home is yours. You earned it. Do not let them manipulate you into giving it up." Stephanie's words strengthened my resolve to maintain my boundaries. On Thursday, I went shopping for a gift for Jason, settling on an expensive watch I knew he had been eyeing. Despite everything, I wanted to be the bigger person and show up with a thoughtful present. Friday night, the evening before the party, I received a call from my cousin Allison. We had been close as children but had drifted apart as adults, so I was surprised to hear from her. "Kim, I am calling because I am a bit confused," she said after we exchanged brief pleasantries. "Aunt Diane told my mom that you are giving them your condo as a gift. She said you promised it to them months ago and are just working out the legal details. Is that true?" I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. "What? No, that is absolutely not true. I have repeatedly told them I am not giving them my condo." There was an awkward pause on the line. "That is what I thought," Allison finally said. "It seemed weird, but they have been telling everyone in the family about it. Aunt Diane even showed my mom photos of the place and talked about how they are planning to renovate once it is theirs." By the time I hung up with Allison, I was shaking with anger. My parents had not only been pressuring me to give them my home, but they had been telling our extended family that I had already agreed to do so. They were trying to back me into a corner by creating a situation where I would look like the bad guy if I contradicted their lies. I barely slept that night, torn between skipping the party altogether and going just to set the record straight with my family members. In the end, my desire to not let my parents control my actions won out. I would go to the party, maintain my boundaries, and calmly correct any misconceptions if the topic arose. Little did I know that decision would lead to one of the most traumatic nights of my life. Saturday arrived, and I spent the morning trying to calm my nerves. I chose my outfit carefully, a tasteful navy blue dress that was appropriate for the occasion without being flashy. I styled my hair, applied natural-looking makeup, and tried to give myself a pep talk in the mirror. "Just a few hours," I told my reflection. "You can handle anything for a few hours." I arrived at my parents' house precisely at 7 in the evening, the time indicated on the invitation. Several cars were already parked along the street, which meant I would not be the first guest to arrive, a small relief. With Jason's gift tucked under my arm, I took a deep breath and rang the doorbell. My mother answered, wearing a silver cocktail dress and a smile that did not reach her eyes. "Kimberly, you made it," she said, leaning in for an air kiss near my cheek. "Everyone is in the backyard. Jason will be so pleased you came." The backyard had been transformed with strings of twinkling lights, round tables covered with crisp white tablecloths, and a small platform where a jazz quartet played soft music. About 30 people were already mingling, holding flutes of champagne and small plates of appetizers. The scene was picture perfect, exactly the kind of sophisticated celebration my parents loved to host, especially for Jason. I spotted my brother near the bar, surrounded by a group of friends. He was laughing at something someone had said, looking handsome in a tailored suit. When he saw me, his smile faltered slightly before he excused himself from his group and came over. "Kim, you came," he said, giving me a brief hug. "Thanks for making it." "Happy birthday, Jason," I replied, handing him the wrapped gift. Would not miss it. An uncomfortable silence fell between us. It was clear from his expression that he knew about the tension between our parents and me. His eyes darted nervously to where our father was chatting with some relatives. "Listen," he said in a low voice. "Maybe just try to keep things civil tonight, for my sake." Before I could respond, his girlfriend Tara appeared at his side, linking her arm through his. "The caterers need you to approve something," she said, barely acknowledging my presence. With an apologetic shrug, Jason allowed himself to be led away. I made my way to the bar and requested a glass of white wine, needing something to occupy my hands. As I turned to survey the party, I noticed several relatives watching me with curious expressions. My Aunt Patricia approached, her eyes gleaming with the excitement of potential gossip. "Kimberly, darling," she said, air kissing both my cheeks. "So generous of you to help your parents out like this. Your mother has been showing us photos of your beautiful condo. She is so excited about moving in." I took a large sip of wine before responding. "There seems to be some confusion, Aunt Patricia. I have not agreed to give my parents my condo." Her eyebrows shot up. "Oh, but your mother said." "I am sure she did," I cut in, trying to keep my voice level. "But that is not the case." Patricia's expression turned from surprise to something akin to disapproval. "Well, I am sure you will work it out. Family should always come first, do not you think?" Similar conversations followed with other relatives who had all apparently been told the same story by my parents. By the time dinner was announced, I was emotionally exhausted and seriously considering making an early exit. But the thought of giving my parents the satisfaction of driving me away kept me rooted in place. The dinner setup was elegant with assigned seating. I found myself at a table with Jason, Tara, my parents, and my father's brother, Uncle Frank, and his wife, Aunt Judy. As the catering staff served the first course, my father dominated the conversation, regaling everyone with stories of Jason's latest accomplishments at work. Just last week, his boss called him the most promising young executive they have hired in a decade, my father boasted, beaming at Jason. "Chip off the old block, I always say." "That is wonderful," Aunt Judy said. "And what about you, Kimberly? Still doing that computer thing?" Before I could answer, my mother jumped in. "Kimberly is doing very well. In fact, she is in a position to be extremely generous to her family." She gave me a pointed look that clearly communicated her expectation that I would play along with their narrative. I focused on my salad, pushing a cherry tomato around the plate. The conversation moved on to other topics, but the tension at the table was palpable. Jason kept shooting nervous glances between our parents and me, while Tara seemed oblivious to the undercurrents, chatting happily about a recent shopping trip. After the main course was cleared, my father stood and tapped his knife against his champagne flute. The music stopped and conversations died down as everyone turned their attention to him. "Thank you all for coming tonight to celebrate our son Jason's 25th birthday," he began, his voice carrying across the backyard. "As parents, there is no greater joy than seeing your children grow into successful adults." He continued with a glowing tribute to Jason's achievements and character, praising his work ethic, his kindness, and his devotion to family. The speech was touching, and under different circumstances, I might have been moved by it. But I could not help noticing that there was no mention of me, his other child, sitting right there at the table. And while tonight is about Jason, my father continued, turning to look directly at me. I would be remiss if I did not also acknowledge the incredible generosity of our daughter Kimberly. My stomach dropped. I knew what was coming but felt powerless to stop it. As many of you know, Kimberly has decided to gift her beautiful condo to her mother and me, allowing us to downsize in style as we approach retirement. This kind of selfless giving is a testament to the values we instilled in our children. A murmur of approval rippled through the gathering. People turned to smile at me, nodding in appreciation of my supposed generosity. I felt my face flush with anger and embarrassment. As applause broke out, I found myself standing my napkin falling unnoticed to the ground. "I need to clarify something," I said, my voice shakier than I would have liked. "I have not agreed to give my condo to my parents. This is my home that I purchased with my own money, and I have no plans to give it away." The applause died, instantly replaced by awkward silence. My father's face darkened with anger while my mother's smile froze in place. "Kimberly is just being modest," my mother said with a forced laugh. "We have discussed this extensively as a family." "No, we have not," I countered, finding my voice growing stronger. "You have asked repeatedly, and I have said no repeatedly. There was never any agreement." My father set down his champagne flute with a sharp clink. "This is neither the time nor the place for this discussion, Kimberly. We will talk about it later." "There is nothing to talk about," I insisted. "And I would appreciate it if you would stop telling people I am giving you my home when that is not true." The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. Jason was staring at his plate, clearly mortified. Other guests were shifting uncomfortably in their seats or exchanging whispers behind their hands. "Kimberly, come inside. Now." My father's voice was low and dangerous. Against my better judgment, I followed my parents into the house. They led me to my father's study, closing the door behind us. As soon as we were alone, my father's facade of civility dropped completely. "How dare you embarrass us like that in front of everyone," he hissed. "After everything we have done for you." "What exactly have you done for me?" I shot back. "You cut me off when I went to college. You have never supported my career choices. You only started showing interest in my life when you realized you could benefit from my success." My mother stepped forward, her face contorted with anger. "We gave you everything. We raised you, we educated you, we gave you opportunities. And now you think that entitles you to take my home, the home I saved for years to buy, the home I pay the mortgage on every month." I was almost shouting, now years of suppressed anger finally boiling over. "You ungrateful little bitch," my father spat. "After all we sacrificed for you." "I am not giving you my condo," I said firmly. "Not now, not ever, and I want you to stop telling people that I am." What happened next occurred so quickly, I barely had time to register it. My mother, always so concerned with appearances, always so controlled in public, grabbed a half-full bottle of champagne from my father's desk and swung it at my head. The bottle connected with my temple with a sickening crack. Pain exploded through my skull, and I felt warm liquid running down the side of my face. In shock, I raised my hand to my head, and it came away red with blood. The study door opened, and Jason and Tara stood in the doorway, their eyes widening at the scene before them. My brother's mouth opened in horror, but no words came out. Tara gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "She fell," my mother said, immediately dropping the bottle as if it had burned her. "She was upset, and she tripped." I looked at my brother, silently pleading with him to speak up, to tell the truth about what he had just witnessed. But Jason remained frozen, his eyes darting between our parents and me, paralyzed by a lifetime of conditioning to never contradict them. Clutching my bleeding head, I pushed past all of them and out of the study. I grabbed my purse from the coat room and staggered to my car, ignoring the curious stares of guests who had ventured inside to see what the commotion was about. No one, not a single person, tried to stop me or help me as I fumbled with my keys, blood dripping onto my dress and the pavement below. As I drove away from my parents' house that night, my head throbbing and my vision blurring with both blood and tears, I knew with absolute certainty that nothing would ever be the same again. The physical wound would eventually heal, but the knowledge that my own mother had assaulted me, and that my father and brother had stood by and done nothing, created a wound far deeper than any champagne bottle could inflict. The drive to the emergency room was a blur of pain and shock. I remember gripping the steering wheel tightly, focusing all my energy on staying conscious and keeping the car on the road. Blood continued to trickle down the side of my face, staining the collar of my dress. My head throbbed with each heartbeat, and my thoughts were a jumbled mess of disbelief and betrayal. Somehow, I made it to the hospital. The emergency room was busy that Saturday night, but one look at my bloodied appearance moved me to the front of the triage line. A nurse named Sandra gently guided me to an examination room, her kind eyes full of concern. "What happened, sweetie?" she asked, as she began cleaning the wound. "My mother hit me with a champagne bottle," I said, the words sounding surreal as they left my mouth. Sandra paused briefly, then continued her work without judgment. "You are going to need stitches. The doctor will be in shortly." The cut required 7 stitches, and I was diagnosed with a mild concussion. The doctor, a woman in her 50s named Dr. Martin, asked if I wanted to file a police report. I hesitated, the lifetime of family loyalty warring with the reality of what had just happened. In the end, I declined, but Dr. Martin documented the injury and its cause in my medical record just in case you change your mind. By the time I was discharged, it was nearly 2 in the morning. My phone, which I had silenced upon arriving at the hospital, showed 12 missed calls and 23 text messages. 3 were from Jason, the rest from various family members. None were from my parents. I scrolled through the texts. Most were variations of, "What happened?" or "Are you okay?" But Jason's messages took a different tone. "I cannot believe you ruined my birthday party. Mom says you were being hysterical. Dad says you better not be telling people lies about what happened." The final message, sent an hour after the others, was slightly more conciliatory. "I hope you are okay. Call me when you can." I turned off my phone without responding to any of the messages. I was in no state to drive back to my condo, so I called Stephanie, who immediately offered to come get me. Within 30 minutes, she arrived at the hospital gasping when she saw my stitched and bandaged face. "Oh my God, Kim, what happened?" In the safety of Stephanie's car, the whole story poured out of me. The party, the announcement, the confrontation, and finally the assault. Stephanie listened in horrified silence, occasionally shaking her head in disbelief. "You are staying with me tonight," she said when I finished her tone, leaving no room for argument. "And tomorrow too, as long as you need." I spent the next 3 days at Stephanie's apartment recovering from both the physical injury and the emotional trauma. My concussion symptoms made it difficult to look at screens for long periods, so I called in sick to work and mostly rested, trying to process what had happened and what it meant for my relationship with my family. On the 3rd day, my phone rang with a call from an unknown number. It was my company's receptionist, Amanda. "Kimberly, I am so sorry to bother you while you are out sick, but I thought you should know. Your parents are here in the lobby. They are insisting on seeing you, saying it is a family emergency. I told them you were out, but they do not believe me." My heart raced with anxiety. "They are at my workplace." "Yes, and they have been here for almost an hour. Your father is getting quite aggressive with security. Should I call the police?" I closed my eyes, mortified at the thought of my parents causing a scene at my job. "No, please do not do that. Just tell them firmly that I am not in the building, and that if they do not leave immediately, the company will have to take action." Amanda sounded relieved. "Will do. Take care of yourself, Kimberly." After hanging up, I received a text from my coworker, Brian. "Your dad is going ballistic in the lobby. Security is escorting them out." What is going on? The humiliation of having my family drama spill over into my professional life was almost too much to bear. I had worked so hard to build my career and reputation, and now my parents were jeopardizing that too. I resolved to return to work the next day, not wanting to give my parents another opportunity to ambush me there. Over the following weeks, I discovered just how far my parents were willing to go in their campaign against me. Through mutual acquaintances and family members who reached out privately, I learned that my parents were telling everyone I was having a mental breakdown. They claimed I had become paranoid and delusional, inventing stories about them trying to take my condo. According to them, I had accidentally injured myself at the party during a hysterical episode and was now refusing treatment. Some family members believed them without question. Others, like my cousin Allison, were skeptical and reached out to hear my side of the story. When I showed Allison the photos I had taken of my injury and the medical report that clearly stated assault with glass bottle as the cause, she was horrified. I knew Aunt Diane could be manipulative, but I never thought she would do something like this, Allison said during our coffee meeting. And the way they are trying to discredit you now is disgusting. Through Allison, I also learned something that explained my parents' increasing desperation. They were in far worse financial shape than I had realized. They had taken out a second mortgage on their home of 30 years, maxed out multiple credit cards, and borrowed money from several family members with promises of repayment that never materialized. Most disturbing of all, Allison revealed that my parents had already been using my condo as collateral in their financial dealings. They showed Uncle Greg pictures of your place and told him they were moving in next month. They even used it to secure a loan from him, promising he could have exclusive use of it for his family vacations once it was theirs. The pieces started falling into place. My parents were not just hoping I would give them my condo out of some twisted sense of familial obligation. They had already leveraged it in their financial schemes and were now desperate because they could not deliver what they had promised. As I dug deeper into my parents' financial situation, I discovered they were on the verge of losing their house to foreclosure. The second mortgage they had taken out 5 years ago had a balloon payment coming due, and they had no way to cover it. Their attempts to refinance had been rejected due to their deteriorating credit scores. The family home where I had grown up, where Jason's birthday party had taken place, was teetering on the edge of repossession, and suddenly their frantic attempts to get their hands on my condo made more sense. They needed somewhere to live when they inevitably lost their house, and they saw my property as their safety net. But there was something else about the house that caught my attention. In conversations with Allison and other family members, I learned that the original down payment for the house had come from an inheritance my mother received when my maternal grandmother passed away. This was before I was born, but it was significant because I had always been told that my grandmother had left nothing of value. This discrepancy nagged at me. If my mother had received a substantial inheritance enough to buy a house in an upscale neighborhood, what else might I not know about my family's finances? And more importantly, had that inheritance been meant solely for my mother, or had there been provisions for grandchildren as well? With these questions in mind, I decided it was time to take a more proactive approach. If my parents were willing to assault me and destroy my reputation to get what they wanted, I needed to protect myself and explore every option available to me. It was time to stop being the perpetual victim in the family dynamic and start taking control of the situation. After the incident at Jason's party and the subsequent campaign of lies my parents launched against me, I knew I needed to protect myself both legally and financially. I scheduled a consultation with Jennifer Davis, an attorney specializing in family law and property disputes. Jennifer's office was in a sleek downtown, building a stark contrast to the emotional chaos I had been experiencing. "So, let me make sure I understand," Jennifer said after I had explained the situation. "Your parents have been demanding that you give them your condo, which you purchased entirely with your own money. When you refused, your mother physically assaulted you, causing injuries requiring medical attention. And now they are spreading false information about your mental health to family members and have even shown up at your workplace." I nodded, wincing slightly as the movement pulled at my healing stitches. "That is correct. I know it sounds unbelievable. Unfortunately, it is more common than you might think," Jennifer replied, her expression sympathetic but professional. Family financial abuse takes many forms. What concerns me most is the physical violence and the damage to your professional reputation. Have you considered filing for a restraining order? We discussed that option, but my immediate concern was protecting my condo and understanding if I had any legal recourse for what had happened. Jennifer suggested we investigate my parents' financial situation more thoroughly, particularly the inheritance my mother had received from my grandmother. Often in these cases, there are financial irregularities that go back years, she explained. If your grandmother left specific provisions in her will that have not been honored, that could give us leverage. With Jennifer's guidance, I began researching my family's financial history. We submitted requests for public records related to my grandmother's estate and the purchase of my parents' home. The process was tedious and often frustrating, with many documents requiring in-person visits to county offices and court archives. 2 weeks into our investigation, we made a breakthrough. Jennifer called me at work, her voice unusually animated. "Kimberly, I found your grandmother's will. You need to see this." I met her at her office that evening, and she presented me with a copy of a legal document dated 32 years earlier. As I read through the formal legal language, one passage jumped out at me. The residential property located at 247 Maple Avenue, or any property purchased with the proceeds thereof, shall be held in trust with 50% interest allocated to my daughter Diane Margaret Wilson, and 50% interest divided equally among any grandchildren born to her. I looked up at Jennifer, my hands shaking slightly. "Does this mean what I think it means?" She nodded, her expression serious. "Based on this will and the subsequent property records we have obtained, you legally own 25% of your parents' house, and your brother Jason owns the other 25%. Your mother's inheritance was never meant to be solely hers. The house should have been held in a trust with you and Jason as partial owners once you were born." The revelation was staggering. For years, my parents had acted as if the house was entirely theirs, never once mentioning that my grandmother had intended for her grandchildren to have ownership stakes. They had taken out loans against the property without my knowledge or consent, potentially putting my inheritance at risk. Is this why they have been so desperate to get my condo? I wondered aloud. Because they knew they were in danger of losing the house, and with it my portion of the inheritance they never told me about. It is certainly possible, Jennifer agreed. The second mortgage they took out 5 years ago would have required all owners to sign off on it. Since you were never informed of your ownership stake, you obviously never consented to that loan. Legally speaking, that makes the second mortgage potentially fraudulent. Armed with this new information, Jennifer advised me of my options. I could sue my parents for failing to disclose my ownership stake and for making financial decisions about the property without my consent. I could force a sale of the house to claim my 25%, or I could use this information as leverage to negotiate an end to their harassment and attempts to take my condo. After careful consideration, I decided to pursue the sale option. Not out of revenge, though. I would be lying if I said the thought of my parents facing consequences for their actions did not bring some satisfaction. Rather, I wanted a clean break, a definitive end to the toxic financial entanglement with my family. To better understand the value of my stake, I consulted with Marcus Johnson, a real estate agent who specialized in properties in my parents' neighborhood. Marcus conducted a thorough market analysis and determined that the house, despite its second mortgage, still had substantial equity due to the area's appreciating property values. Based on current market conditions, the property would likely sell for around $1.2 million, Marcus explained. After paying off the primary mortgage and accounting for selling costs, there would be approximately $600,000 in equity to be divided according to ownership percentages. This meant my 25% stake was worth roughly $150,000, a significant sum that my parents had concealed from me my entire life. The irony was not lost on me that while they had been trying to take my $450,000 condo, They had been hiding $150,000 that was rightfully mine. With Jennifer's help, I prepared formal legal documents, asserting my ownership claim and my intention to force a sale of the property. Before filing them, however, Jennifer suggested giving my brother Jason the opportunity to join the action, since he too owned 25% of the house, according to our grandmother's will. I arranged to meet Jason at a neutral location, a quiet coffee shop halfway between our homes. He arrived looking tired and uncomfortable, clearly still conflicted about the birthday party incident and its aftermath. "Thanks for meeting me," I said as he sat down across from me. "What is this about Kim?" he asked warily. "Mom and Dad think you have lost your mind. They are really worried about you." I took a deep breath, reminding myself that Jason had been subject to our parents' manipulation even more than I had. "I need to show you something," I said, sliding a copy of our grandmother's will across the table. Jason skimmed the document, his expression changing from confusion to shock as he processed its implications. "This cannot be right," he murmured. "They would have told us." "They should have," I agreed. "But they did not. They have been using property that is partially ours, as if it belongs solely to them. They have borrowed against it without our knowledge or consent, putting our inheritance at risk." I explained everything I had learned about our parents' financial situation, the fraudulent second mortgage, and their desperate attempts to get their hands on my condo, as the reality sank in Jason's face, paled. So when they told me they were planning to help me buy a house next year, they were probably planning to use my condo or the proceeds from its sale I finished for him, money that was never theirs to give. Jason sat back in his chair, running his hands through his hair. I do not know what to say. I knew they had financial problems, but I had no idea it was this bad or that they would hide something like this from us. I told him about my plan to force a sale of the house to claim my rightful share of the inheritance. "You have the same right to your 25%, I added. "You can join me in this action if you want to." Jason was quiet for a long moment, visibly struggling with conflicting loyalties. "I need time to think about this," he finally said. "And I should probably talk to them first, give them a chance to explain." I warned him against tipping our parents off before the legal papers were filed, knowing they might try to hide assets or create further complications. But Jason, ever the peacemaker, insisted on giving them one last chance to do the right thing. 2 days later, he called me, his voice tight with anger. "You were right. They denied everything at first, then tried to convince me it was all a misunderstanding. When I showed them the will, Dad exploded, saying Grandma had no right to dictate what happened to his house, and that we were both ungrateful for even questioning them. Mom just cried and said I was breaking her heart just like you did." "So what do you want to do?" I asked. There was a brief silence before Jason replied, "I am in. Let us do this together." With both of us on board, Jennifer filed the legal papers the next day, formally asserting our ownership stakes and our intention to force a sale of the property. The stage was set for a final confrontation that would forever change our family dynamic. The legal notification of our claim arrived at our parents' house via certified mail on a Tuesday morning. By Tuesday afternoon, my phone was exploding with messages and calls, not just from my parents, but from extended family members who had been recruited into their campaign against us. I had anticipated this reaction and had prepared accordingly, setting boundaries with a brief statement I sent to family members who contacted me. "I am aware that my parents are upset about recent legal actions taken by Jason and me. These actions were not taken lightly, but are necessary to claim inheritances that were rightfully ours, according to our grandmother's will. I ask for your understanding and respect for our privacy during this legal process." Jason was receiving similar pressure, but remained firm in his commitment to seeing this through. Our united front was something our parents had never encountered before, as they had always excelled at dividing us and playing us against each other. 3 days after the legal papers were filed, a preliminary court hearing was scheduled to address our petition to force the sale of the house. Jennifer had prepared me thoroughly for what to expect, but nothing could fully ready me for the experience of sitting in a courtroom opposite my parents who refused to even look at me. My father, Robert, had hired Alexander Thompson, an aggressive attorney known for his confrontational style. As the hearing began, Thompson immediately went on the offensive, painting Jason and me as ungrateful children acting out of spite rather than legitimate legal concerns. Your Honor, this is nothing more than a vindictive attack by children who were generously provided for their entire lives, Thompson argued. My clients have owned this home for over 30 years and have always treated it as their sole property, with no objections from anyone until now. Jennifer calmly responded by presenting our grandmother's will and the property records showing that the house had indeed been purchased with inheritance funds specifically designated to be shared with grandchildren. This is not about gratitude or spite, Your Honor, Jennifer stated. This is about recognizing the legal rights of my clients to an inheritance that was deliberately concealed from them. Mr. and Mrs. Wilson have not only failed to acknowledge their children's ownership stakes, but have encumbered the property with loans taken without the consent of all owners. The judge, an older woman named Judge Harriet Monroe, listened attentively to both sides before speaking. It appears from the documentation presented that there is a valid claim of partial ownership by the petitioners based on the terms of their grandmother's will. The fact that this ownership was never properly disclosed or recorded does not negate its validity. My father leaned forward and whispered urgently to his attorney, who then requested permission to present additional evidence. Your Honor, my clients believe that the petitioners are not acting in good faith. In particular, Miss Wilson has been experiencing mental health issues that may be affecting her judgment in this matter. I felt a surge of anger at this familiar tactic, but before I could react, Jennifer was already on her feet. Your Honor, we strongly object to these unfounded allegations. If counsel wishes to introduce claims about my client's mental health, we are prepared to submit medical records documenting the physical assault Miss Wilson suffered at the hands of her mother, which resulted in a concussion and 7 stitches. Judge Monroe's expression hardened. Mr. Thompson, I would advise you to stick to relevant legal arguments rather than attempting to discredit the petitioners with unsubstantiated claims. My mother's face paled at the mention of the assault, and my father's expression darkened with anger. They had clearly not expected me to have documentation of the incident or to be willing to present it in court. After hearing all arguments, Judge Monroe ruled in our favor, finding that, based on our grandmother's will, Jason and I each owned 25% of the house. She ordered an independent appraisal of the property and set a timeline for its sale with proceeds to be distributed according to the ownership percentages. As we left the courtroom, my father attempted to approach us, his face red with anger, but Jennifer smoothly intercepted him. Any communication should go through counsel, Mr. Wilson, she said firmly before guiding Jason and me toward the exit. The next significant confrontation came 2 weeks later, when the court-appointed appraiser needed access to the house. Jason and I met the appraiser, a professional woman named Linda Cooper, outside our parents' home. My parents had been notified of the appointment, but had not responded to confirm they would allow entry. We rang the doorbell, and after a long wait, my father opened the door, his expression hostile. So this is how you treat family, he said bitterly, sending strangers to invade our home. Miss Cooper is the court-appointed appraiser, I explained calmly. She needs to assess the property as part of the legal process. And if we refuse, my father challenged, then we would have to report that to the judge, who could hold you in contempt of court. Jennifer had advised me to remain factual and unemotional during any interactions, and I was doing my best to follow that guidance. My father reluctantly stepped aside to allow the appraiser entry, but as Jason and I moved to follow, he blocked our path. This is still our home, he said. You two are not welcome here. Linda looked uncertainly between us. I typically have the owners present during an appraisal, she said. We are 25% owners each, Jason pointed out. We have a right to be present. After a tense standoff, my father finally relented, allowing us inside but following closely behind as if we were burglars rather than his children. My mother was sitting rigidly in the living room, refusing to acknowledge our presence. As Linda conducted her assessment, measuring rooms and taking photographs, I was struck by how different the house felt. This had been my childhood home, yet now it seemed like a museum of painful memories rather than a place of belonging. The appraisal revealed some surprising information. The house was worth significantly more than the initial estimate provided by Marcus. Several home improvements that my parents had made over the years, including a kitchen renovation and the addition of a sunroom, had substantially increased its value. Additionally, the property had nearly an acre of land, which was increasingly rare and valuable in that neighborhood. Linda's final appraisal came in at $1.5 million, which meant that after paying off the primary mortgage, each of our 25% shares would be worth approximately $300,000, double what we had initially estimated. This revelation only intensified my parents' resistance. They filed objections to the appraisal, tried to delay the sale process, and even attempted to transfer ownership of certain fixtures and built-in furniture to other family members to reduce the property's value. Each of these maneuvers was countered by Jennifer, who patiently documented every action for the court. Finally, after months of legal wrangling, the day came when my parents were ordered to vacate the property to prepare it for sale. Jason and I, along with real estate agent Marcus, arrived at the house to meet with the staging company that would prepare the home for showings. My parents had clearly left in a hurry, with some furniture still in place and personal items scattered throughout the house. As we walked through the eerily quiet rooms, Marcus pointed out several features that would appeal to buyers. The original hardwood floors throughout the main level are a major selling point, he noted, and the crown molding in the formal dining room is the kind of detail you do not often see in newer constructions. As we continued the tour, we discovered something unexpected in the master bedroom closet, a hidden wall safe that had been exposed when my parents removed a built-in dresser. Marcus called in a locksmith who confirmed that as partial owners of the property, Jason and I had the legal right to access the safe. Inside, we found documents that shed new light on our family's financial history. There were insurance policies we had never been told about, stock certificates for investments our parents had claimed were worthless, and most surprisingly, the original deed to a vacation property in Maine that had supposedly been sold years ago. They have been hiding assets, Jason said, his voice a mixture of shock and disappointment. All these years they have been crying poverty while sitting on investments and property they never disclosed. The discovery of the hidden assets required another round of legal proceedings, delaying the sale of the house. During this time, my parents made a sudden attempt at reconciliation. My mother called me directly, bypassing Jennifer for the first time in months. "Kimberly, sweetie," she said, her voice honey sweet, in a way that immediately put me on guard. "I think this has all gone far enough. We are family. We should be able to work things out without lawyers and courts." "What exactly are you proposing?" I asked cautiously. "Your father and I have been doing some thinking, and we realize we may have been a bit harsh with you. If you would consider dropping this lawsuit about the house, we could all sit down together and discuss a fair arrangement for everyone." The old me might have been tempted by this offer, eager to restore family harmony at any cost. But I had learned too much about my parents' true character to trust their sudden change of heart. "Any proposals should go through Jennifer," I replied, "and I am not interested in dropping the lawsuit. The court has already established that Jason and I are legal owners of 50% of the house." My mother's sweet tone instantly vanished. "You always were a difficult child," she snapped. "This is why we always preferred Jason. At least he understands the meaning of family loyalty." "Actually, Mom, I am standing right here with Kim," Jason said, having been listening on speakerphone. "And I am not dropping the lawsuit either. We both deserve our inheritance." There was a shocked silence before my mother hung up. That was the last direct communication we had with our parents before the final resolution of the case. The house ultimately sold for $1.6 million, slightly above the appraised value due to a bidding war between two motivated buyers. After paying off the primary mortgage and the selling costs, the remaining equity was divided according to the court order: 50% to my mother, 25% to Jason, and 25% to me. My share came to just over $320,000, more than twice what we had initially estimated. The hidden assets that had been discovered, including the main property, were still being evaluated, but would eventually add to our inheritance. As I deposited the check representing my rightful inheritance, I felt no triumph or joy, only a sense of closure. The money was never the point. Not really. It was about standing up for myself, refusing to be manipulated or abused any longer, and claiming what was rightfully mine. My parents were forced to downsize, dramatically moving into a small 2-bedroom condo in a less desirable neighborhood. They continued to maintain to extended family that Jason and I had acted cruelly and ungratefully, but the discovery of their hidden assets had damaged their credibility, even among their staunchest supporters. Jason and I emerged from the ordeal with a stronger relationship than we had ever had. Free from our parents' manipulative triangulation, we were finally able to develop a genuine sibling bond based on mutual respect and understanding. As for my condo, the $450,000 property that had sparked this entire conflict, it remained mine, a symbol of my independence and the boundaries I had finally learned to establish and maintain. The legal battle with my parents officially ended on a Tuesday afternoon when the final documents were signed and the last checks distributed. I remember walking out of Jennifer's office into the bright sunshine feeling strangely hollow. I had won in the legal sense, secured my inheritance, and stood up to years of manipulation and abuse. Yet the victory came with the painful knowledge that the loving family I had always longed for would never exist. The first few weeks after the resolution were perhaps the hardest. Despite everything my parents had done, I found myself plagued by waves of guilt and second-guessing. Had I been too harsh? Should I have tried harder to reconcile? Was the money worth the permanent fracture in our family? Stephanie, who had been my rock throughout the ordeal, finally sat me down for a heart-to-heart conversation. "Kim," she said gently, "what your parents did was not normal. They assaulted you, physically tried to steal your home, lied about your mental health, and hid your inheritance for decades. You did not break this family. They did." Recognizing that I needed professional help to process everything that had happened, I began seeing Dr. Grace Patterson, a therapist specializing in family trauma. Our weekly sessions became a safe space where I could untangle the complex emotions of grief, anger, and relief that often overwhelmed me. "What you are experiencing is a form of grief," Dr. Patterson explained during one of our early sessions. "You are mourning the loss of the family you wished you had, the parents who should have protected and supported you rather than exploited you. That grief is valid and needs to be acknowledged." Through therapy, I began to understand how my parents' narcissistic behavior had shaped my own tendencies toward people-pleasing and difficulty setting boundaries. I learned to recognize the warning signs of manipulative relationships and to value myself enough to walk away from toxic situations. One unexpected development during this healing period was my evolving relationship with Jason. Without our parents' influence constantly driving us apart, we were able to build a genuine connection for the first time. Jason had his own healing journey to navigate, coming to terms with his role as the golden child and the ways he had been used as a weapon against me. "I should have stood up for you that night at the party," he confessed during a dinner at my condo about 3 months after the court case concluded. "I saw what Mom did, and I froze. I have been replaying that moment in my mind ever since, wishing I had done anything. You were conditioned your entire life to never contradict them," I reminded him. We both were victims of their manipulation, just in different ways. Jason nodded, his eyes reflecting years of complicated emotions. I am trying to be better now, to be the brother you deserved all along. As I continued to heal, I made a decision about a portion of my inheritance that felt meaningful. I established a small foundation called New Beginnings, dedicated to providing resources and support for victims of family financial abuse. With an initial investment of $50,000 from my settlement, the foundation offered emergency assistance, legal guidance, and therapy services to people in situations similar to what I had experienced. Working with the foundation introduced me to others who had survived family betrayal and found ways to rebuild their lives. Their stories of resilience inspired me and helped me see my own experience as part of a larger pattern rather than a personal failure. My condo, which had been the catalyst for so much conflict, became a project of reclamation and healing. I renovated the space, completely replacing the neutral colors my mother had always pushed for, with vibrant blues and greens that made me happy. I converted the guest bedroom that my parents had coveted into a home office where I could work on both my software engineering projects and foundation business. Every change I made to the space was a declaration of ownership and independence. The modern art my father had dismissed as pretentious garbage now hung proudly in my living room. The kitchen I had always wanted, with its open shelving and butcher block countertops, replaced the traditional design my mother had tried to convince me was the only acceptable choice. As the months passed, I gradually reconnected with extended family members who reached out independently. My cousin Allison became a regular visitor, often bringing her young daughters for weekend brunches. My mother's sister, Aunt Patricia, who had initially sided with my parents, called me after learning about the hidden assets. I owe you an apology, Kimberly, she said. I believed what your mother told me without question, and that was wrong. I should have listened to your side of the story. These reconnections helped ease the pain of family estrangement, reminding me that while I had lost my parents, I was not alone in the world. I began to understand that family could be chosen, built on mutual respect and genuine care rather than obligatory blood ties. Stephanie, who had stood by me from the beginning, became more like a sister than a friend. We celebrated holidays together, established traditions, and supported each other through life's challenges. Her unwavering loyalty showed me what healthy relationships actually looked like. 1 year after the court case concluded, I hosted a housewarming party in my condo. It was not that the space was new, but rather that I was new in it, finally fully claiming it as my own without fear or guilt. I invited the people who had become my chosen family: Stephanie, Jason, and his new girlfriend Megan. He had broken up with Tara shortly after the party incident. Allison and her family colleagues from work, who had supported me, and friends from the foundation. As I looked around at the people gathered in my living room laughing and sharing stories, I realized that I had created something beautiful from the ashes of family trauma. Not the family I was born into, but the one I had chosen, and that had chosen me in return. Dr. Patterson had encouraged me to think about what forgiveness might mean in my situation. Not reconciliation, which would be neither safe nor healthy given my parents' unrepentant behavior, but an internal release of the anger that could otherwise consume me. Forgiveness does not mean allowing people back into your life to hurt you again, she had explained. It means freeing yourself from the burden of anger so you can move forward. I was still working on that aspect of healing, finding it easier some days than others. But I had come to understand that maintaining boundaries was not selfish, but necessary for my well-being. The guilt trips that once would have sent me spiraling now bounced off the stronger sense of self I had developed. As the housewarming party wound down and guests began to leave, Jason lingered behind to help me clean up. As we worked side by side in comfortable silence, he suddenly stopped and turned to me. I am proud of you, Kim, he said simply, for standing up for yourself, for helping others through the foundation, for everything. You are the strongest person I know. His words touched something deep within me, a place that had always hungered for validation and recognition. But the difference now was that while I appreciated his support, I no longer needed external approval to know my own worth. The journey from that terrible night at Jason's birthday party to where I stood now had been long and painful. I carried scars, both literal and figurative, that would always be part of me. But I had learned that those scars were not merely markers of trauma, but testaments to survival and growth. Standing in my condo that evening, surrounded by the evidence of a life reclaimed and rebuilt on my own terms, I felt something I had rarely experienced growing up: peace. Not the conditional peace that came from compliance, but the deep, abiding peace of authentic self-acceptance and boundaries well defended. If you have ever had to choose between family obligation and self-preservation, I hope my story gives you courage. Sometimes the hardest boundaries to set are with the people who should have loved us most. But you deserve to be safe. You deserve to be respected. And sometimes creating distance is the most loving thing you can do, not just for yourself, but for the authentic relationships that can only flourish in healthy soil. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members? Or found yourself building a chosen family when your birth family was toxic? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that they are not alone in their struggles with family dynamics. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember that healing is not linear, but it is always possible.